What if a U.S. destroyer fought the Viking Great Heathen Army? In the autumn of 865 AD, three brothers sailed from Scandinavia with one purpose: revenge. Their father, Ragnar Lothbrok, the most famous Viking who ever lived, had been captured by the king of Northumbria and executed by being thrown into a pit of venomous snakes. So his sons came back, not with a raiding party, with an army. The Great Heathen Army, that's what the terrified Anglo-Saxon scribes called it in the Chronicle, and it was led by three men whose names alone made English monks put down their quills and start praying: Ivar the Boneless, Halfdan Ragnarsson, Ubba. Within a year they had captured York, the second largest city in England. Within 2 years they had conquered 2 of England's 4 kingdoms. By 870 AD, only Wessex stood between the Vikings and total control of England. Every English army that had faced the Great Heathen Army had been destroyed or bought off. Every single one. But what if, on the morning the Viking longships appeared off the coast of East Anglia in 865 AD, something was already there waiting for them? A ship unlike anything the Norse had ever seen. A gray steel warship the length of 5 Viking longships placed end to end, moving at 30 knots against the wind and tide without a single oar in the water. Part 2. The ancient side. To understand why England was so helpless against the Great Heathen Army, you need to understand what a Viking warrior actually was. This wasn't conscript infantry. Every man in that army had been training since childhood, not for parades, not for formation drills, but for personal combat. A Viking warrior was expected to be able to fight in close quarters with an axe or sword, throw a spear accurately at 30 meters, row a longship through a storm, navigate by stars, and, if required, fight while swimming. They were the special forces of the 9th century. Their longships were engineering masterpieces, flat bottom enough to navigate rivers that were only a meter deep, light enough to be carried overland between waterways, fast enough to outrun most other vessels under sail or oar. The English had no equivalent vessel. When the Vikings appeared on a river, there was no naval response possible. They simply arrived where they wanted to arrive and left before anyone could organize a defense. The Great Heathen Army was led by Ivar the Boneless, a man whose nickname, historians argue, either referred to extraordinary physical flexibility that made him terrifying in hand-to-hand combat, or to a condition that made his bravery in fighting all the more remarkable. Either way, he was acknowledged even by his enemies as a military genius. In 866 AD, Ivar captured York by exploiting a civil war between 2 Northumbrian kings who were too busy fighting each other to notice the Vikings at the gate. The city fell in a single day. In 869 AD, they caught up with King Edmund of East Anglia. He refused to renounce Christianity. They tied him to a tree and used him for target practice with arrows. He became a saint. They kept his kingdom. This was the army that English scribes called simply the Heathen, and they had never been stopped. Now let's talk about the USS Arleigh Burke, 509 feet long, steel hull, no sails, no oars, no visible means of propulsion from the outside, just 2 massive gas turbine engines that drive it through the water at over 30 knots. Its main weapon is the Tomahawk cruise missile, range over 1,000 miles. It flies at 500 miles per hour at low altitude using GPS navigation, accurate to within a few meters. One Tomahawk carries a warhead capable of destroying a city block. The Burke-class destroyer carries 96 of these in vertical launch cells below deck. Its 5-inch naval gun fires shells the size of a man's forearm at a rate of 20 rounds per minute. Each shell travels 12 miles. The Phalanx CIWS, a rotary cannon at the stern, fires 3,000 rounds per minute. To put this in perspective for 865 AD, the most powerful ranged weapon a Viking had was a composite bow with a range of 200 meters. One Tomahawk could sink the entire Great Heathen Army's fleet from a position so far away the Vikings couldn't even see the ship on the horizon. But here's the thing, the Vikings didn't have a fleet battle planned, and a destroyer cannot follow a longship up a shallow river into the English countryside. That's where this gets interesting. Part 4. The battle. September 865 AD. The Great Heathen Army sails into the estuary off the coast of East Anglia, the raven banner of Ragnar's sons flying at the mast. And there, in the estuary mouth, is something none of them has ever seen. A gray shape low in the water, longer than anything the Norse have ever built. No sails, no oars moving. Moving anyway. Ivar signals the fleet to halt. He is not a man who panics. He has conquered kingdoms. He studies the gray ship from his longship. The destroyer's commander is equally cautious. The first shot is a ranging round from the 5-inch gun, deliberately aimed into the water 200 meters ahead of the Viking fleet. Ivar watches the water column fall back into the sea. Then he turns to his helmsman and says, "Go around it." Phase 2. Vikings adapt.
This is what separates the Great Heathen Army from every other force you might pit against modern weaponry. They don't fight the thing they can't beat. They go around it. Ivar splits the fleet. Half the longships head north up the coast, using shallow inlets the destroyer cannot follow. The shallow draft longships slide into rivers barely a meter deep. The destroyer draws 5 meters. It is trapped in the estuary. The commander launches a helicopter. No helicopter in 865. No air support, just the ship and what it carries. He fires tomahawks at the northern fleet of longships. 2 missiles, 2 ships destroyed. But there are 40 ships. 38 are now inland. Ivar the Boneless is on a horse, riding north toward York, with 3,000 warriors behind him. The destroyer has won the naval engagement completely. It has also lost the war. Here is the brutal reality of a naval vessel against a land army. The Arleigh Burke can control every waterway in England. No Viking ship moves without its permission. But that means nothing once 3,000 warriors beach their longships and start walking. York is 60 miles from the coast. London is further. Neither is visible from the ship. The commander can fire tomahawks at reported Viking positions. But in 865 AD, there is no GPS targeting for the Vikings. There is no radio communications network to tell the ship where Ivar's army is. There are no satellites, no reconnaissance aircraft, no forward observers with communications equipment. The ship is blind on land. It has 96 tomahawks. If it used them all on population centers and supply routes, it might be able to disrupt the Viking advance. But then it's out of long-range munitions and still has no ground forces. 3,000 elite Viking warriors operating in the English countryside they have studied for years. Against one ship cannot leave the water. The Vikings are already at York. The decisive moment comes not on land, but at sea, when Ivar makes his first mistake. He needs to bring reinforcements from Scandinavia, a second fleet, 200 longships. The destroyer is what follows is the most one-sided naval engagement in history. The tomahawks fire in sequence, targeting the center of the fleet formation. Each missile has been pre-programmed for a specific cluster of ships. The first 3 hit within 10 seconds of each other. 3 separate explosions, 3 fireballs visible from the Norwegian coastline. Then the 5-inch gun opens up, 20 rounds per minute, each shell traveling 12 miles. Slow this down. So who wins? It depends on what you mean by winning. The destroyer wins every battle it can fight. At sea, it is unchallengeable. The Viking naval capacity is gone within hours. Ivar's reinforcement fleet never arrives. But Ivar the Boneless, with 3,000 warriors already inland, is a problem the destroyer simply cannot solve. He is too mobile, too intelligent, too far from water. In the real Battle of England, this plays out for years, and 3,000 elite Viking warriors in the English interior is not nothing. The honest answer is, the destroyer saves England from the full invasion. It does not destroy the Great Heathen Army. Ivar and his brothers are still in York. The question of what happens next depends entirely on whether Alfred of Wessex can handle 3,000 Vikings, who are now isolated, outnumbered, and angry. Which is, of course, almost exactly what happened in real history anyway. History sometimes ends up where it was going, regardless of the obstacles. Now, here's what I want to know. If you had to pick one weapon to send back to defend England in 865 AD, the destroyer, the F-22, or the carrier, which one do you choose? Drop it in the comments. That's your 2 a.m. what if. Viking longships, a U.S. destroyer, and the sons of Ragnar Lothbrok. Drop your own matchup in the comments. I read every one. Subscribe for a new scenario every week.